This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation. Welcome to a Leadership Beyond. I believe this is our second panel discussion around the topic of self-leadership. We did one earlier in the summer, and we know that there's so many different ways to approach leadership for self, and it's such an important topic, especially now, I think, in the climates that we're facing in business and in life. So we're here again, and we welcome Dot and Dotty. So that's fun to our panel. So welcome, ladies. Why don't we get started? Tom, unless you want to say anything?
No, let's start with the introductions. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So Dot, why don't we start with you? Please just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background and how you yourself became so passionate about supporting leadership journeys. And then Dottie will pass the baton to you.
Good. Thanks, Adrian. My name is Dot Proux, and I am an executive coach and leadership development advisor. Have been doing this on my own for about 8 years, and I developed the passion for it really because I was a leader in professional services for a number of years, and it was hugely energizing for me and also very draining. And so it was a very dynamic and dichotomous career. I loved every second of it, and if I wasn't careful, it would kill me. So I was a tax partner in a Big Four accounting firm, and firms will take as much of you as you will give. There is no stop in their lingo. They're happy to take all of you if you give it. So I had to learn to self-regulate, and I had a great coach inside our firm. Luckily, the firm knew that there was the potential for them to kill us, and so they gave us all kinds of support. But we had to own it. They weren't going to tell us what to do with those resources. We had to learn to use them ourselves, and so I did. I used my coach for the last 7 years of my career. I went to Mayo Clinic for an executive physical and always participated in their health-oriented workshops every couple of years. That was all paid for by my firm. I found that what I was more jazzed up by was the dynamics between the people and not the tax consulting. Go figure. So that's where I'm coming from. Thanks.
People find the people, I think, right? even if your education and your career choice didn't direct you there.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thanks.
And Dottie, please share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I came up through some different roles I was in professional services in one of the big six back then, I think it was, but was in consulting and project management, and then learned about change management and did a lot of work in change management. Then went into Harley as a manager of change management, and then did some various projects there and got into organizational development. And what I realized was most of the work I had done at Harley was all organizational development. I had never really even knew that much about it, but I loved the work. I worked with leadership in the IT organization early in my career at Harley, and then later I was doing it with the materials organization and just loved that work. And during the economic downturn, was part of a very big layoff, 2 big layoffs, and started my own company. And in that economic downturn, did a lot of more change work, and then also weaved in the leadership development that I had done with Harley Davidson, with the leadership there in the department that I worked in, as well as one-on-one coaching. I've had a coach since 1997-ish, off and on, mostly on, and have had just such transformational experiences from that. And so I wanted to do more of that. And then most recently, my sister 2.5 years ago was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and passed away just a couple of months ago. And I truly believe, she and I even talked about this, that the stress that she endured both in her marriage, in her divorce, in the work that she did as an operations manager in a dental clinic was so stressful that really set her cancer so aggressively that when they found it, it was stage 4. And so the coaching that I do is I really work with women who are either trying to avoid or on the verge of or in burnout, which is, can be a lot of different things, but primarily where they're really wanting to make sure that they either stay healthy or that they start to let some of those health issues go that are stress induced.
Wow. I got goosebumps from that story, Dotty. Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it fuels my question, because I had an observation as I was reflecting on what do we cover today with this broad topic of self-leadership. And in recent work that I've been doing with clients, I've been overhauling manager and leader development programs. And in the uncovering that I do with them to get to the key competencies of what's really critical for you and your organization to define the desired outcome, what comes up more often than not is, what do managers need to do for employees and how to interact with them? And when I suggest and highly recommend and make that unpopular opinion to kind of push and disrupt a little bit, to say, all right, but don't we need a section on how to lead yourself? And it's met with, is that really the best use of their time in this program? We've got a certain small amount of time and we need them to act a certain way. And I'm like, yeah, okay, light bulb, right? So act a certain way. So I'm wondering, I'm pretty sure I know the answer given the context you both shared, but do you agree that self-leadership is a critical competency? And if so, why? Doc, do you want to start?
Sure. Of course, it seems almost like a redundant question, right? In fact, I'm surprised, Adrienne, that any of your potential clients push back on that, because that's where it all starts. Most of the coaching that I do, I use mindfulness and emotional intelligence, which is at the heart of that is self-awareness. And you have to be self-aware if you are going to manage how you show up in the world. I can't make the direct link. It almost seems intuitive that, of course, if you're going to lead other people, you have to know yourself and manage yourself in a way that's not just positive for them, but sustainable for you. Boy, Dotty, something you said really resonated with me about your sister. As much as I loved my work at my firm, every couple of years, because I was so driven, every couple of years, I would have a physical impact, some kind of a major virus that I had to be out for a week or two with, or a minor little blip, a tiny surgery I would need, or just an emotional kind of so overwhelmed I needed to take a few days off. And that ability to stay in touch with yourself on a moment-to-moment basis was not something that I learned until later. My husband called it cliffing. I would cliff every couple of years. Yeah.
So your body told you must slow down, when if you were paying attention, you might have come to that conclusion without the cliff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember where I read it, but just recently I was listening to a talk, it might have been Dr. Gabor Mate, and he might have been quoting Bessar van der Kolk or some of his own work. But if you don't take care of your body will, scream
Let you
back.
know.
Your body will let you know eventually. I mean, I know people who I've talked to about, their burnout, and they got to the point where they were getting sick every couple of weeks for a few days. And one of them, and this was a woman at the age of 29. It's not like this only happens to, you know, women who are, or men, anyone who are in their career for a long, long time. She loved her job. She loved it. She absolutely loved it. And she was just, you know, she was wearing her body out. She was stressing her body so hard that all of a sudden she was getting sick every couple of weeks. And she ended up having to take a 3-month leave of absence.
Wow.
I
Which
think
of course has a business impact, right?
Yes,
That's
of
the
course.
point, is we
there's a
don't want,
business case. Yes.
right. We don't want to get to this point, even if you're only looking at numbers and you're not looking at the health and the wellness of your people. This has a business impact. And we can't assume that we're all taking good care of ourselves, or that we have the knowledge and the awareness to take good care of ourselves outside of what a company is supporting, right? You know, in that education that we're providing.
And an aspect that I'm not sure all leaders, you know, the senior leadership understands, is that you're missing the creative genius of your people when they are working every evening and working 80 hours a week, just driven nonstop. I mean, there's a way to put in those kind of hours on a periodic basis and still take care of yourself. And your brain needs rest. Your brain needs that time. We only use 5% of our brain. And when we shut down and go do something else, active rest, as I refer to it as, is we are able to let all of those things that we're thinking about, all the problems we're trying to solve, all the different things that we're trying to create in the world, we let the rest, the 95% of our brain, go to work on that. And we come up with so many more and better ideas. I know people who said once they started a strict shutdown routine at like 4:35, 5:36, whatever it is, they actually got more done in their day, where they used to work every day after they put their daughter to bed. So
Let's
the
frame the next sprint, if you will, around energy. Something Dot said, which was the extremes to frame it, and we can bring it in a little. She said, I love my career, and they'd take as much as I could give until it killed me. And that's the extreme. And of course, the other extreme, you don't put anything into it and you have lethargy. And there's a dynamic tension between giving of yourself and giving yourself. I'm thinking of the saying, what profit a woman if she gain the whole world and lose her soul? At a certain point, it's soul nurturing, and at a certain point, it's soul destroying. That would be work, relationships, whatever the it is. So I'd just like to ask the question about, and Dotty, you pointed towards it with the extreme of burnout, but also just the idea of how to invest your energy so it bears fruit without spending your energy so it's depleted. We'll start with Dotty.
with
Commenting
me,
on energy management.
yeah.
You
And
had energy
so,
in your LinkedIn profile, so I know you care about it.
yes, I do. I have a unique process that I use. It's built off another program, and I call it the energetic blueprint. And we each all have our core self. If you think of 3 concentric circles, our core self is our unique preferences, our gifts, our talents, and that is where our energy is created. Then we have our developed self, which is habits and patterns that sometimes serve us and many times don't. And those are energy draining, the ones that don't. When we are doing things and responding in ways and performing in ways that are out of alignment with that core, it drains our energy. And then our contextual self, the last circle, is the different roles we play in life. And some of them are aligned to that core self and some of them aren't. And when we know that core inside out, upside down, backwards, we know our core, we can start to observe those patterns of energy that are draining us. My husband and I used to joke, I got a lot of what, early in my career, I got a lot of what my husband and I playfully called does not play well with others. And a lot of that was I was in a role, I was doing work that was just not aligned to who I was. I was a project manager, and all of that structure, all of that analytical, I can do, but it drains my energy. And I didn't realize how much. And so my reactions to people and situations were much more aggressive and overbearing and all of these other things because of that energy drain, as well as because of some of these developed habits that, as Dr. Gabor Mate talks about, we learn in childhood as ways of meeting our core needs. So along with that, the gifts and talents and preferences, we have our core needs. And when we're doing things and not understanding and getting in touch with, as Dot had said, really knowing, what we need on a moment by moment, like learning those tools to, whether it's mindfulness, the self-awareness of getting back in touch and getting back in tune with ourselves so that we can ebb and flow. Stressors will always be there. We don't have to experience the stress of them all the time and get to the cliff, as Dot said.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm struck by how similar what you're saying is to the way I see it, Dottie. It's not just our name that we have in common. When you said know the core, that's really at the heart of it. And in order to do that, you literally have to slow down. When you are going 100 miles an hour through your day, you're not going to notice that you are getting close to the cliff. You're not going to notice that you are not playing well with others until somebody tells you, right?
Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive for leaders, especially today. Tom, you said you wanted to really discuss it since the world has accelerated on us, and it has. I have an anecdote that I want to try to remember to tell you guys about. But when we are rewarded for going super fast, it's counterintuitive for us to slow down and go, hold up, what's happening with me? What's happening with my core? Am I literally as basic as this? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Did I get enough sleep? How long should I work today? That's the basics. And then the more meaningful stuff, what's happening with me? Am I fulfilled? Is this really what I want to be doing? And then just in the moment to moment, slowing down just for a few moments when you come into these stressful and kind of tension filled situations to think about what's going to serve me and the person I'm with best in terms of how I behave, how I see this, and what I think, what I say. The anecdote I wanted to give you guys, I have seen, clients that are kind of up and coming in their career that are, I call them young, newer leaders, have been at this, really the grind of it for maybe 2 or 3 years. They are taking Adderall to stay awake. They are getting prescription drugs to stay focused because the expectation is that they will bill more hours than is typical in a salaried profession. It's getting more intense, even though we know more and more about the dangers of that for our health and our well-being as individuals. But Adrienne, as you said, for organizations, you lose productivity the more you expect from people. I don't see companies getting any better at helping with support. If anything, with a few rare exceptions, they are happier and happier to provide healthcare plans that will get you your drugs so you can focus more. It's sad. It's sad what's happening. We know more, but we're not using the knowledge. We're not putting it into place. And so here's my big perspective. You cannot expect the company to do it. You have to do it yourself. You have to empower yourself. You have to recognize that you have personal agency and you're the one who has to do this. You're the one who has to do this. Companies have policies out there, great policies, have EAP programs, all that stuff, but People aren't accessing them. Men aren't using their paternity leave. Companies that offer 4 to 6 month paternity leaves, the men are not using it. Whose fault is that? I mean, I know the company has pressures and a culture that encourage that, but you've got to lead yourself.
Right.
Since that's what we're talking about, it rests with you.
Right. Take advantage. And I think, when I get pushback with clients, I ask about the measures, right? What are you measuring now? And I think that's the hardest part, is that there are not really true measures on the wellness of your people and profit, productivity, right? The connection between those things. Well, we have engagement scores. Okay.
Yeah. But they
How
know what
about
their bonus is
insurance?
based on. That's measured.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know
So
their
what,
billable hours in your world. Yeah, that's measured.
right. What are the measures that we could be recommending companies look at to really get under the covers of what's happening with their people in their organization? I mean, Dot, you said, in a tax firm, right? The numbers look great, but what measures compared to
A
the
dead
insurance
dot.
claims?
A dead dot. As she
Yeah.
said, if she had no boundaries, that was the way she put it.
Yeah,
Well,
well, I think there is a stat out there that says that retired partners of Big Four, formerly Big Six accounting firms, don't live as long as the rest of the population. There are some forward-looking stats that show the impact of engaging in a lifestyle like that. Again, it's a great opportunity. I'm not denigrating it, but we need more skill in leading ourselves if we're going to participate in a culture that just loves to take whatever you're willing to give.
Well, the good news about what you said, Dot, is it begins with us. And then the idea is leadership's about influence. So if we start to put those boundaries in place and use our energy better, then our teammates and others are going to be impacted by that and say, well, maybe I could do that. And you can start to impact the culture wherever you are in the organization without waiting for some magic wand from on the top of the mountain. And so we're all in this together.
Yeah, I had a client, a very big retailer, and I coached one of their leaders, one of their just below the VP level leader, an executive leader. And one of the things we worked on was setting boundaries where she was supposed to be on call like once a month. But then really she was on call every weekend, because if it was something with her store, she was always looking at emails, always checking things, always wanting to get on the calls and check and see what was going on. And we started to put some boundaries and I said, I want you to try this weekend to not look at your phone, not look at your email. And as she went through that and really set it up with your partners, with your other co-leaders, so that they know if there's something that you really need me for, call me. And it worked. She was amazed at how well it worked. And they ended up implementing that across the whole region. It was funny because her boss came back to me months later and said, oh yeah, we started this new program where, when they're on call, and everybody else really does get to take a break. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. That started with but it can, like you said, Tom, it starts with us. It starts with us taking that accountability for our own well-being, our own health, our own mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being, and it can have a ripple effect.
So these are grassroots initiatives, right? It starts with one, because where it ended in your story is an operating procedure. So
Yes.
maybe you can't get the leaders to say, we need an operating procedure to protect the wellness of our managers for this on-call procedure. But one manager did it, right? So there's a little bit of take a chance, take a risk, because that's risky. You're going against the grain.
Yeah.
That takes courage and willingness to put yourself first. Do you see, if you do any work with the younger generations, I'm curious if you see a difference between the younger generations coming into work and their ability to prioritize self-leadership and self-wellness versus some of the veterans.
It's individual by individual, but I'm
Okay.
just kind of gonna think about your question here for a second. And what's coming to me is a lot of the younger clients that I have, especially those who are aspiring leaders or already in leadership positions, the way they phrase it is they want to coach on boundaries. How do I set boundaries? They recognize that their firm, their company, their employer will take whatever they will give, and they want to set up boundaries that keep them healthy and allow them to keep their job and retain their brand, that is skyrocketing to the top. That seems to be the term that the younger leaders are using. Help me figure out some boundaries.
Yeah, I had a client yesterday that I was just talking to about boundaries, and it's interesting how, and I always say that I'm a leadership coach, but also a life coach, because you cannot separate the two. Sometimes it's things that are going on personally that are creating that stress, that's creating the reactions in the work environment. And if you can set boundaries in your personal life to make things easier there, that can also impact how things are happening in your work life. So the boundaries are so critical. And I think understanding what a boundary is, because some people have a misinterpretation of it, and just knowing that depending on the situation, but part of it is that, if you're going to do this, then I am going to do this, not a retaliation against you or punishment or, resentment, anything, but, it just depends on the situation. But just saying that I am going to, when I'm on vacation, I am not going to check email. I'm going to assume that if you absolutely need me, you will call me. I am not going to check. I'm going to stay, and warning people ahead of time. Don't email me for things over the next week or 2 weeks, whatever your time off is. Please don't email me. That way I don't have to worry about checking and not getting a full inbox when I get back. Don't CC me on things I don't need to know about. When I come back, I'll expect a report out of where things have been and how things have gone. But I don't need all of that, because that, I think, is why a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to come back to, 1,000 emails. Well, you can control
Here's a
that.
pro tip. This is bold. Setting your out of office. First, setting a rule that any new emails that come in go straight to trash, and then setting your out of office to say your email has just been sent to trash. When I'm back, come and get me and give me a report. Right? I'm not answering, and I mean it.
Well, so that's the problem with that dance. If you don't communicate well, is that people say, I know she gets this. I got her out. She responded to the last 3.
Right.
And then it pops up in the 5th email. Dottie's out of the office. And so it's really about not warning people, but I tell people they should have at least a conversation. I work best when ... Because we assume, not this ... the little, because we just assume, oh, she'll read it on Slack because we're all on Slack, or and not even taking the effort to realize that people are different in what works for them. So not just communicating the boundaries, but communicating the process. And Adrian, I don't know if it reminded you of this, but the policy, remember when we were first working with remote work, the temptation was to write a policy before we've had the experience. We had to learn what all this is. The easiest thing to do is get these bright people in there and write this clear policy, except it doesn't match reality in any way at all. And then we got to scrap it instead of learning and writing the policy as we go. This worked well, this didn't work well. So it has to be experiential as well as, thought out and put on paper.
something about that term boundaries too, and Dottie, the way you put it made me think of this. When a client comes and says, "Okay, I want to work on boundaries," it does imply this is a barrier between me and my employer. I feel I need to be in defensive mode. And that's an unempowering mode to be in. And they get to choose their perspective about how they're going to be with their employer, with their firm. And if we can help clients figure out how to not see it as a me versus them,
Mhm.
but how do I navigate this environment with all these other people around me who are having similar struggles that I am? So it's a little bit about how you approach it. And then this other thought, especially with young leaders, there's a transition they have to make where they begin to realize, I think sometimes with our help, that the they that expects me to do all this stuff, I have become them. If I'm a
Mm,
leader in the organization, I am them.
Mhm.
mm,
What am I doing? So sometimes a client, before it lands on them that they have to self-lead for their own good, if they recognize that they have to self-lead for the good of the people around them, it can pull them forward toward it. But there's
mhm,
that big, with those younger leaders, there's that transition they have to make, that this is not a war between me and the employer. I am the employer.
mm.
I
That's
am
profound. That's
Yeah, I love
profound.
that. It's
a big
do as
shift.
I do as I do, not as I say,
Yeah.
right?
The language is so powerful. We even talk about we've got to protect our boundaries, and that language implies we're at war. That's
Yeah.
very,
Mm,
very profound.
mhm,
I think it's also empowering, as
Yeah.
you said, that in terms of really taking 100% responsibility. I'm 100% responsible for my well-being and not being a victim. When I put up that boundary as a defensive wall between me and someone else without the conversation, then I'm saying that I'm trying to protect this outside of me from having an impact on me. And the only way it has an impact is because we have a thought about it. And so how we work through all of our thoughts and the feelings that are generated from those thoughts, that's what drives what we do or don't do. And so we have to be thinking about not looking at it from a victim. I have to,
Yeah.
put up that boundary, because while yes, it is a boundary, it is a way of saying and communicating, here's how I want to operate. And not just how I need to operate. And Tom, you said it, what works, I work best when, and whether, they may or may not care. Here's what I am going to do.
Mhm.
I am
mhm,
going to shut down every day at 5:30. I am going to not take my computer with me when I go on vacation. And
mhm.
Yeah.
it's interesting as I'm saying that, because I'm going on vacation in 4 days.
I'm
It's
going to
gonna
email
rain
you
for two
just
of
to
those days.
test this.
It's gonna rain for 2 of those days, and I'm like, I could be getting this and this done on
Oh,
this
it doesn't apply for
project.
entrepreneurs.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yes, being an entrepreneur can be challenging, and following our own advice.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, this is the hardest part because this is a vibrant conversation, but we have time for one more question.
Am I going to ask it?
I think you are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious from each of you, what is your personal leadership strategy? What things do you do as a regular practice to keep hold on this?
So I'll start, since Dot has started most of the questions. I'll go ahead and start. So there's a number of things that I do for my own personal leadership and well-being. Some of them are just routines that I've gotten into when I wake up. Part of it is a health routine, but I get my eyes in the sunlight every morning at sunrise, without glasses and contacts. I journal every morning. I work out for about 45 minutes to an hour, mostly an hour, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes every morning. I do a cold plunge every morning. And so there's some things that I do for both my mental, spiritual well-being, as well as my physical well-being in the morning. And then throughout the day, I'm going to give you an example related to just what's happened to me recently with my sister passing. I am really working on, because one of the things I know is that I can stuff down my emotions. I can kind of put that barrier up. I can, as Brene Brown calls it, put up the armor. And so I've been really working on allowing and feeling all of my emotions. And there are times when it's hard and I don't have, or I can't, you might be in a meeting but I make a promise to myself to then check back in later. Maybe at 5 o'clock, I sit down and I say, okay, what's happening? What's going on? But there are times where Monday morning, we had a big family event, first one that my sister wasn't at, and I had a really hard time Sunday, had a really hard time Monday morning. And I just allowed myself the grace and the space to feel it. Whatever that looks like for each person. For me, I do a lot of crying. I'll scream, I'll shake, to try and work through those things. And it might just be that, a client canceled a meeting and I get frustrated about it. Any of those little things, I get curious. It's really allowing myself to put more and more space in between all of those things that are happening and what's going on in my head, the stories that I'm telling that are going to cause me to react in a way that is either going to serve me or not serve me. So to me, that emotional, Dot, you had called it emotional intelligence, and whether it's emotional management, emotional fluency, is really being in touch with my body, with my heart, with my emotions on a moment by moment basis to know what I need. I ended up, having some pain, and I was like, okay, this is a little weird. There's more to it. There was nausea along with it. And I ended up in the ER for a half a day. It turned out to be some muscle issues, which I kind of figured it was, but it was, I'm tuning in and listening. Okay, this is different. There's something different going on. I need to tune in. And so that to me is a big part of it. I could go on. There's probably, 7 or 10 other things, things I do with my daughter or things I do with my husband.
Well, we'll have to do another session and get those in, because it's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Similar to what Dottie said, I think the way I start my morning is the trigger for all of it. I usually make sure that I'm up by 7. I know about myself that being up earlier is better for me. It motivates me. I make sure I get outside, even if it's raining. I bought all the right rain gear. I move my body really early in the morning. I walk a couple of miles before I start work. I make an effort to spend meaningful time with my husband every day, somewhat on a routine basis, because we both have dynamic lives, hobbies and work. And so I make sure that I spend time with him. It keeps me grounded. And it's that kind of stuff, the people that you love that kind of support you all through your life, that are easy to take for granted. I learned through my career, ups and downs, boy, don't do that. Establish a routine with the people that you love. I talk to my children. I make sure that I have meaningful conversation every day. If I go through a day where I haven't had meaningful conversation with at least one person, I feel sort of empty. Yeah. So nothing overly structured, but as I thought about it and listened to what Dottie was saying, there is a list.
Yeah.
There's a list that I kind of go through. Yeah.
And you fill your buckets up.
I want to add one more thing, Dot, that you said that I think is so critical, and it's a shift that I made several years back, is being present. When my husband comes home, he wants to unload all of the frustrations, all of the things. He's in an apartment maintenance supervision role, and there's a lot that goes on that's frustrating for him. And so just being present with that, just really not making dinner while he's talking, but just trying to be, working as best I can to be present with that, not doing 10 other things. So
And summing the two up, it's really pay attention and respond from the best you possible. And that might include a lot of different tactics, but if you're not paying attention, you'll get swept down the river.
Definitely.
Thank you both so much. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.